All right, I'm recording, and I have my notes, and I'm ready.
What's this? What's this? There's mutants everywhere. What's this? There's missiles in the air. What's this? It's Destro fighting Serpy. How demeaning. Wake up, Coco, this isn't fair. What's this? What's this? What's this? There's something very wrong. What's this? There's Destro dropping bombs. What's this? The skies are stacked with Destro's forces strafing. Everyone's trigger happy. I need to change my nappy. What's this? What's this? There's ninjas throwing stars and chopping zombie heads. Pointy medieval weapons leaving every cobra dead. There's that leather-clad bimbo. I can't believe my eyes. And on that monitor, Destro looks to be coming on inside. Oh look, what's this? My defenses are burned out hiss. Why, my future is so bleak. Inside, he's stepping forward with a threat I'm starting to perspire. What's this?
Yo ho ho Joe, and a big co ho ho bra to you. It's Mark, and welcome to a festive Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. Today we will be looking at G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 312, released in the festive season of the 26th of December 2024, which in over here, these parts, we call that Boxing Day. If you are new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Now, I will not be talking about this comic book on my own. Joining me as always, it's a real festive Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
So, Boxing Day, remind me, Tim, is that a thing in the States?
No, I don't know anyone who knows what that is. Actually, that's not true. I probably know someone. Americans don't know what that is, and they don't talk about it. So what is it?
Okay. It's the day after Christmas. It's a bank holiday over here, and it's called Boxing Day, generally because families have rows and they get into fights the day after Christmas.
You're not kidding?
It's a Victorian tradition where the richer classes used to box up gifts to give to their servants, etc. I believe is the origins of that.
Okay.
So I think that I need to give an explainer to audiences about the way that these episodes come out. So they come out pretty much every Thursday, like clockwork, ever since the beginning, the days of yore, when Talking Joe's first begun. We do have a YouTube channel, and all of the audio episodes do get released into a YouTube podcast audio-only stream. We also have videos that contain pictures and images and moving, bits of, I'm trying to think of a different word for pictures, but moving images of myself and Tim, etc. Sometimes we'll do that with cameras on. Sometimes we'll just do audio only. It's entirely up to us on how we feel and how much visual content we think we have available to share on screen. This episode is audio only, so if you are listening as a podcast, you are not missing out on anything. And if you listen generally as a podcast, you're not missing out on too much, because we try and paint a picture with our words.
Yeah, sometimes if we're interviewing an interesting G.I. Joe artist or writer or toy maker, we'll say, what room are you in? And can you describe it for us? And then they'll paint a picture.
Mm-hmm. And also, typically, if the videos, I'll leave them a little bit more rough around the edges, whereas the audio only is more tightly edited and edited such that we're not necessarily drawing attention to images on screen as well, so it doesn't feel like you're missing out that we're describing something on screen. These episodes are crafted with you, the listener, in mind, is what I'm saying. But we on the YouTube channel at the time of recording, we are skirting very close to a grand total of 800 subscribers now. We're, at the time of recording, I think we're at about 780. So if just 20 of you who regularly listen but aren't subscribed on YouTube, head on over to the Talking Joe YouTube page, hit subscribe. We could be beyond 800 by the end of the year. It would be a Christmas miracle.
As we serve these episodes to you, dear listeners, it could be your Boxing Day present to us, really.
Indeed. Okay, getting into G.I. Joe proper, there was a couple of bits of news and a couple of things that I noticed from last time that we didn't talk about. So last issue 311, I made an observation after we'd finished talking, Tim, which was that last issue we talked about the fact that we didn't cut back to the pit or anything like that, which was relatively unusual. But I also noticed on reread was that basically no Joes talked in the issue at all, apart from Storm Shadow, who has one line and, is a former Cobra, so he can fall in that bucket for this purpose. So I wonder if that was kind of a bit of a thought experiment from Harmer, where previously he's had, all silent issues, all splash page issues, all female issues. Maybe this was an all Cobra dialogue only issue, or antagonist dialogue.
Mark, you should write an email to Postbox the Pit and make the observation and ask the question. I did not notice that. I have not reread the issue. That is a cool observation. Based on how Hama works, I think it is very possible it is, as you said. It could also be a coincidence because there are enough factions in G.I. Joe that you could have an issue that focuses very much on Villain Faction 1, Villain Faction 2, Villain Faction 3, and the Joes, the hero faction, is present but doesn't do as much.
And since we last recorded about ARAH as well, a nice little nugget of news dropped, which was that Paul Pelletier and Tony Cordos will be back from issue 316. So I'm assuming that Chris Mooneyham's run for this little stint here, his second run, will wrap up with 315 with a one-issue break where we've going to have a guest artist, and then Paul Pelletier and Tony Cordos will return for probably another 5-issue tour of duty.
I'm just repeating myself here, but Skybound has, I don't think, ever hired a lackluster interior artist to draw any Skybound comic. So I'm happy with all the choices on G.I. Joe, including this fill-in artist whose name I am not familiar with, and more on that in 2 months when we get to it. I'm a little sad that if Mooneyham isn't doing 5 issues in a row, but as we say every 5 minutes, this is a difficult book to draw, and I would much rather the editors swap in other talents to keep the book running relatively on time and the artists relatively happy than fall behind or get less than stellar work from stellar artists.
And go by the letter page in this particular issue, a lot of the readers are fans of that Paul Pelletier, Tony Cordos art team. A lot of praise singled out in the back of this particular book.
While we're starting at the end and referring to the letters page, letter writer Howard Thomas says in the third letter, I imagine this might be excerpted from a longer letter. Many of us fans had serious issues with the quality of the artwork at the end of the original Marvel run and in the new series before the Image run, which is to say the IDW run. But as of 306, the artwork is now near perfect. And editor Alex Antoni says, our plan is to shoot for the absolute best on this book for as long as possible. It's what ARAH fans deserve. And I think that first sentence is factually accurate, and that second sentence in response is the kind of patting us on the head that we appreciate. We do deserve it.
We are good boys, yeah. Excellent stuff. Okay, so speaking of this very issue 312 that was released 26th of December 2024, the day after Christmas, it came to us from the creative team of writer Larry Hama, artist Chris Mooneyham, colorist Francisco Segala, with Sabrina Del Grosso as Flatter, letterer Pat Brousseau, editor Alex Antoni, publication design, Gillian Crabb, and creative consultant, Diana Davis.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Issue 312 cover A is drawn by Andy Kubert, regular cover artist for this series. And let's not forget, he drew some covers for G.I. Joe and Special Missions in 1990, and colored by Tamara Bonvillain. This cover is of Jinx, who is aiming face front, but kneeling on the ground. Both arms are up, brandishing two different sharp weapons. Scarlet is behind. Scarlet is behind her, somewhat in profile, blasting away with a pistol. Behind them are a mass of both attacking and also being shot and repelled vipers. There's a range viper with a gross tongue sticking out. There's a heat viper, I think, with half of its helmet cracked and a zombie face peering through. There is I think, frag viper. There is a frag viper having just gotten shot in the neck, and its helmet, let's say head, is popping up in the air a few inches above where it was blasted. I believe this is the first decapitation we have ever seen on any G.I. Joe cover ever, any publisher, any era, any regular or variant tier, although I could be wrong, and every time I've ever said first time ever for a G.I. Joe issue, Mark finds a good example where I'm incorrect. So let's say this is possibly the first decapitation on a G.I. Joe cover. I see a Night Creeper. In the immediate foreground, there is a Cobra Soldier sort of helmet on top of a monstrously zombified, let's say dead Cobra Soldier, sort of staring at us. This is a fun convention that a lot of fantasy artists and comic book artists have picked up on in the last years and decades, where if you have a hero or heroes in the center of a composition and a horde of marauders, monsters, zombies attacking them from all sides, it's fun to have one of those villains in the immediate foreground, all the way on the left or all the way on the right, both attacking but also looking back at us, the reader. This is not quite that, but it is a version of that. And I think there's a track viper just above Scarlet's thigh. I see three yellow eyes and what I think is the telltale shape of the track viper's gray helmet without the red visor. But this could also just be someone's knee pad with three yellow dots on it. And then behind them is some smoke and some compositional black negative space, suggesting that this is nighttime. Not my favorite Andy Kubert cover. I think it is a good cover, and it is really well drawn. You know, Andy Kubert on not his best day, it's still better than most people's covers. The camera here is actually on the ground based on sort of where the head for that front right bottom Cobra Soldier head is. But the perspective doesn't quite say to me sort of how we're looking up at or straight on at the two Joes, that the camera really is low. And Jinx is kneeling, but Scarlet is not standing upright, but not fully kneeling. So something about the space and the angle of this feels a little compressed to me. And though I do like the colors, I'll just repeat myself from last episode when the previous cover color artist, Brad Anderson, had departed and Tamara Bonvillain picked up on Kubert's cover for 311. I really like her colors on other books. I don't know if her approach to G.I. Joe covers on Kubert have clicked for me. I'd like a little more separation between Jinx and Scarlet. I know there's more orange in Scarlet's hair, but sort of the two of them, the way that they're drawn and colored, they become kind of one mass, and there's sort of a lot of the same pastel violet and blue and purple in her pants and all of the Cobras and the smoke behind them. So something that I'm missing not seeing Brad Anderson's work here is a really clear separation between planes of space, background, middle ground, and foreground, where one might have a little bit of blue in it, one might have a little bit of green in it, one might have a little bit of orange in it, one might have a little bit of yellow in it to really separate distances. And though I can tell from the actual drawing, of course, that objects here are at different distances from the, quote, camera, this cover mushes together a little bit for me. Separate from the artistic approach and the color approach, I realized looking at this cover, we have not seen Jinx on a regular G.I. Joe cover for a long time. She's very, very tiny on the cover to issue 300, of course, because so is everyone. And there is a head of hers on a variant cover by John Royal on a different version of issue 300, right? So those are 2 years ago, actually exactly 2 years ago. And she's very small on the A cover to 294. She's medium on the A cover to 289. She's very small on the both covers, A and B, to 283. But we sort of haven't substantially seen her since maybe cover to 256B, which is from 2018. So I realized two things here. One, Jinx is not as important a character as she used to be or as she might be. And I think that's because Don Marino has kind of taken her place. Because if you're going to have 3 Joe Ninjas or 6 Joe Ninjas, there's sort of a pecking order, right? Snake Eyes, number 1, Storm Shadow, Scarlet, number 2 and 3, or number 3 and 2, right? And then you sort of go down the line. And what was that Andy Kubert cover? Was it 306, where the Joe Ninjas are coming out of the woods and they're facing to the right, and Snake Eyes has his sword?
309. That's Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Dawn.
Exactly. Dawn has kind of taken over Jinx's role, and I think this is sort of a reflection of just how many characters there are in G.I. Joe, and even though there are a good number of female characters in G.I. Joe, it's still many, many more men. And so this cover to 312 is unusual in that the only 2 Joes on it are both female, and it's both characters from the ninja team, right? You'd sort of expect to also have Snake Eyes in the background or something. So I like Dawn, I like Jinx, but when I first saw this cover, I thought, oh, we haven't seen Jinx in a long time, which is not factually accurate, but we haven't seen much of her, and we haven't seen much of her on covers big. And then the other thing I realized is that I wonder if there is a subtle thing happening in Hama's mind, in editors' minds, in cover artists' minds, where because she's wearing a mask, it's a little harder to draw her on covers because you don't quite know what her emotions are. And of course,
Tim,
Snake Eyes... Sorry?
Where's the dramaturgy?
Right. So Hama has said in many interviews that part of why he inserted the Baroness into issue 1, there was no toy, is because all the other Cobra characters had masks, and it's hard to have characters emote and act if you can't see their faces. So he created a Cobra, co-created a Cobra, who had a face you could see. And you know, Jinx can certainly take her mask off, and this is why in all the superhero movies, starting with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, right, all the way up through the most recent Marvel and DC movies, like every 3 minutes, like, you know, Tom Holland or whoever it is, like pulls off their masks, or, you know, Star-Lord pushes a button and his like visor thing pops off his face, because we want to see the superhero costume, but we really want to see the actor's face.
And more specifically, G.I. Joe, the animated movie, most of that had Jinx not looking like the toy with the mask, but actually with the mask off.
Yes. And I think if you go back to her appearances in Rod Wiggum issues, Ron Wagner issues in the, I forget, 60s and 70s of the Marvel run, she often has her mask off. And it is unusual for any Joe to have a mask. There are only a very, very few. Okay, anyway, so that those are my copious thoughts on cover A.
I had just a couple of thoughts, which was this element of being on the ground, looking up past kind of these fallen enemies or whatever. It is a bit of a Andy Kubert cover trope almost to some degree. There is just recently, for example, issue 306, which was the Snake Eyes cover, where he's got these smoking guns and there's these arms and bodies of fallen alley vipers and frag vipers. And thinking a ways back to the famous issue 95, which was part of that Snake Eyes trilogy issue. I think it's part 2. That has sort of Snake Eyes hunched over some fallen foes there as well, including frag vipers and alley vipers and such. That similar to this cover, where we've got same sort of troopers, but in mutant mode.
Yeah. Cover B is Andy Kubert's black and white inked work with no colors, and I like cover B more than cover A. Not because there's anything wrong with the colors, but sometimes just being reminded of how thoughtful and skilled an artist's inking and sense of light is. Man, cover B, all of the descriptive lines on Jinx's costume, all of the contours on her sleeve that's holding the weapon that's not the sword. I don't know what that's called. All of the lines.
The technical term is a pointy stick, I think.
Thank you. I know you're holding the original action figure mint on card and checking the side of it to be accurate. The directional lines on Jinx's torso that both describe the shape of her breasts, but also her rib cage and also the clothing folds sort of over and around those shapes. And then her knee, just his line work and sense of descriptive shape is so great. And then the sort of busyness of the bottom 2/3 of the cover, and then the much less busyness of the top third with just the black and the smoke and that frag viper head popping up on the left. It's a very cool cover. And if I was someone who wanted to get work as a color artist in comics, I would use this as a template for samples.
Looking at this front cover as well on page 2 of the book with the credits, where the logo isn't shown, it sort of reminds you of a skilled illustrator like Kubert who's very aware of logo placement in design as well, of right, okay, that top 1/3 of the cover is going to get busy with that big G.I. Joe logo, so let's leave plenty of space there for for it and for the image not to get cropped out by it.
Yeah. Cover C is the 1:10 ratio variant. It is drawn by Francis Portela, who's doing this series of, quote, camouflage covers where a character's dominant costume color becomes a bleed compositional element with that background color that is the same. So the previous one was Snake Eyes, almost all in black, in front of his logo, which was red, but then all the spaces around it were black. So where he was black, there's no outline, and the black of his costume connects with the black of the background. Here, the sort of beige mustard color of Duke's shirt connects with the background color. There are no objects, there's no descriptive space in the background. It is just this flat beige color, and there's no outline that sort of signals the end of his sleeve and the beginning of the background, or the end of his collar and the beginning of his background. So it's a fun little sort of artistic design trick. I don't quite know that the word camouflage is fully accurate here. I think Marvel right now is doing the same thing with a different artist and a different name. And I think these variants for Marvel, same approach, are called negative space variant covers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the artistic term is generally negative space, isn't it? Yep.
What's much more fun about this Francis Portela C cover for G.I. Joe 312 is not that Duke's shirt sort of becomes the background, even though he is drawn dimensionally and the background is a flat element. It's that Portela draws Duke with so much personality. And this is something that separates good artists from great artists. It's not just that Duke has a convincing face that looks realistic and sort of the right age, and he looks, muscular, and he looks recognizably like Duke, right? Those are kind of minimums. It's that this feels like a real person, and in this one drawing, he's emoting. His eyes, his small smile, his dimples. There's a very, very slight lean back to his torso, right, where he's got his hand on his belt and he's sort of puffing out his chest just a tiny bit in sort of relaxed confidence. His right arm is holding a very modern machine gun, sort of half at rest and half at the ready. It's very much about that face, right? This is a friendly, reliable, confident, capable, strong Duke, and it's not photo referenced. I don't look at this and think, oh, that's a real guy in the real world. Portella's looking at a photo or drawing his friend or drawing a celebrity. It is still a little bit of this sort of generalized face of comic book art, but it is specific enough that I believe that if Portella drew another Joe right next to this Duke, that Joe would have a different face and a slightly different personality. So for really subtle reasons, this is an excellent G.I. Joe cover because it's a portrait, which is unusual because, our favorite G.I. Joe covers tend to be two ninjas fighting zombie hordes or a bunch of ninjas coming out of the woods and Snake Eyes got his swords.
Very good. What one of the things looking at this more closely that sort of strikes me is that he's subtly referencing Duke's original figure in terms of that is one of the figures with a toothy grin on it. You sort of got this sort of smile and the teeth behind it, and that he's also subtly kind of referencing that V1 design, but then just sort of slightly turning up the dial to modern as well. So it's very much the original design, but with just a few subtle tweaks to kind of make it his own thing in terms of the level of detail on those pouches and the leg holster and all of these kind of things. So it's
the fact that he's got gloves.
Yes, yeah, and these sort of more modern sort of knuckled gloves and things. Yeah, so it's very much Duke, but also very much a specific artist's take on that uniform.
This is, if what Mark just described, you sort of have like a dial of 1 to 5, and the original 1980s action figure is the 1, and you can go 4 more clicks up the dial in terms of enhancing and adding modern cues, adding some detail and adding some bits. This is a 2 or 3, and I like this. I would like artists to stop here. There are other artists in various G.I. Joe comics, sort of this continuity and others, who have gone a few steps further in terms of adding like straps and gear and ribbing on pants and knee pads and stuff. And I like it to less is more, considering how streamlined the early Joe figures were. Mark, there is a retailer exclusive cover, yes?
Yes, so the retailer exclusive this month is by Will Jack for his own website, willjackart.com. And as a bit of a change in pace, this time the variant cover is of the Baroness.
Why are there so many covers of Baroness?
Worth noting that Will Jack also did a previous cover of the Baroness for ARAH 290 for an East Side Comics exclusive. This is in a slightly different style. It's that sort of slightly Vaseline on the camera lens, smoothing out the edges shot of a very young looking Baroness.
Are you describing soft focus?
Soft focus, thanks, Tim. Sort of almost full body. It's up from the knees where she's holding 2 pistols and she's sort of silhouetted against a window. Looks like maybe in a castle, something along those lines. I think a lot of people's reaction to this would be, is this an AI generated image with some tweaks against it? And in his social media post, Wheeljack somewhat shrewdly posted the making of sped up little video of how he did this image to allay those fears. But it's certainly in that kind of style when you're thinking of like AI generated.
We have had some fun comments on the Talking Joe Facebook page recently where folks have said, "Oh, look, another Baroness variant cover. What a surprise. Oh, we have so many of these." And there have been a lot of them in the last 10 years. And I think we can say there have been too many of them. I feel like what we might sometimes be skipping is sort of a baseline of, I'm okay with Baroness covers or variants or retailer exclusive variants, but I do want her in the issue. And just as a general rule for comics, I think any comic book where the cover is just a cool pose by one character, if they're not in that issue, that is a strange misfire for me. And I get it that, the rules are different for retailer variants because you can sort of pick the artist and you can sort of pick the topic. And, certain characters will sell better and certain compositions, maybe no backgrounds, are faster to draw. And if there is original artwork, if it's a favorite character, it might sell faster and for more money. But I always find it weird when there's some like anniversary issue of Batman, and like every 3 months there's an anniversary issue of Batman now between Batman and Detective, and celebrating like multiples of 25, but also for Detective like issue 27s, etc. And it's like, oh, Batman and the Catwoman war comes to its triumphant conclusion. Meanwhile, Robin is cloned, and then the cover has the Joker. It's like, no, the Joker was in an arc 10 issues ago, and he's not in this issue, and he's not even coming back next issue. So the moral of the story is Baroness shouldn't be on Batman covers. Plot breakdown?
Yes.
Plot breakdown.
The Battle of Springfield continues as Destro and Serpentor grapple. Some old-fashioned blows are traded before Serpentor is spotted by a laser target and obliterated by a missile launched from the sky. Elsewhere, a squad of Serpentor's mutant troops arrive at the Springfield Hospital to launch an attack, only to be blocked by the Joe Ninjas and the Dreadnoks. The Ninjas and the Noks are able to make short work of the Cobras. Destro then announces his arrival at the hospital by exploding a Frag Viper's head with a wrist rocket and arranges the medical evacuation of the Baroness back to Scotland. At Cobra Commander's community center base, the CG in the battle armor makes a stand against Destro. Destro sees past the facade and blasts the CG with his guided wrist rockets. Destro enters the community center, coming for Cobra Commander to settle things mano a mano.
I'm going to jump into a story element that I'm reminded of from your description there. Do you think someone who's just out of the ER for critical life-ending wounds, should you put them in a tank helicopter and fly them halfway across the country and the Atlantic? Now, I know that Destro is angry at Cobra Commander for Baroness's wounds, and he probably has the best medical care back at his castle in Scotland. But considering that we were sort of missing the pit in the previous issue, and how good medical care is at some facilities throughout the continental US, I'm sort of wondering for a moment just now, is another story option here? Destro says, evac her to Scotland, and then Joe says, why don't you save 5 hours and send her to the pit? Or why don't you send her to Walter Reed? Because that's only 4 hours, not 8 hours. And then Destro would say, begrudgingly, all right. And then you could, introduce another location and bring the Joes back in. I also like what happened, but just in terms of, we've talked about We talked about how Hama is very aware of distances and time in his stories, you know, and I think our favorite example, we were so pleased with ourselves, Mark, was, I forget, around issue 293 or 296, where two Joe planes take off from the pit and have to get to Cobra Island, and, you know, how long will it actually take? And they mention refueling. I can't help but think of something like that when a woman wrapped in bandages is wheeled out of a hospital like during a war, during a battle, and the guy in the mask says, "Fly her across the ocean."
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe Destro's a bit of a control freak. He probably doesn't feel particularly confident with where she is at present, and would want her moved. You know, we know that emergency room is run by Cobra and is in the middle of a war zone. I think to some degree, Hama tries to kind of cover this with a little bit of expositional dialogue, because Destro does have a little bit of extra wordiness to kind of explain this away, where he says, "Load the Baroness into the transport that has been set up with medical facilities and fly her back to Scotland post-haste. It's not just a transport, that it has been specifically pre-prepared with medical facilities." So at least making some effort to kind of, explain away that action.
I appreciate that.
My high-level take for this issue is, wow, what a lot of fun. The art looks great. There's some great action, some really sort of splashy art that looks fantastic, and some great dialogue. And really, yeah, it seems enormously fun. As I was turning the pages on this one, I was literally sort of laughing out loud, or sort of gasping at some of what we were seeing. It was like, you know, that is cool, or oh my gosh, did they actually just do that? So that's probably my big takeaway for this one. I enjoyed it a lot, and just had a real sense of just fun from it.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction in that I think I made the point many, many episodes ago that sometimes we have 2 or 3 issues in a row where fewer things happen. Mm-hmm. And when we give it a score on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, it's like a 6 or a 7. We're like, well, if it had this and this, it might be an 8. And sometimes you have to have a few of those to build up to an issue like this, where many things converge, right? It's not that the Joe Ninjas are still getting to the hospital, right? It's not that Destro is figuring out what the plot is. It's not that Serpentor Khan is saying he's heading towards Springfield, right? All the players, right? That final page of the last issue was a promise. It was a tease and a promise. And oh boy, did Hama and Mooneyham and Segala and Pat Brousseau, letterer Pat Brousseau, did they deliver, right? Have we had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 page fight between 2 characters, just 2 characters, just punching and kicking and firing missiles? I know we've had a lot of those in G.I. Joe. I think they've tended to have more swords and martial arts. We haven't had one in a little while, and this is so satisfying because A, we want Serpentor Khan taken out. B, it has to be worthy, right? It has to be sort of different than how the original Serpentor was taken out during the first Cobra Civil War, the original Cobra Civil War, not to be confused with the other continuity Cobra Civil War. It has to be different than how the cloned Serpentor was taken out in issue 213, 200 something teen. And it has to be worthy of how tense this scenario is, and how, you know, Hama knows that we are with Destro on this, that we are sort of thirsty for justice or revenge. And what I like about this fight is that Destro is very much himself, right? He dusts himself off on page 4, panel 2 after getting thrown across a panel into what I think is another sort of pile of destroyed hiss parts, right? He doesn't just stand up and deliver a line. He literally dusts himself off. And then he does it again later on after he blows up something, which we can talk about later. And Destro also does this in a way that is sort of at Destro's core. He is a fighter, but he's also an armament military weapons developer and salesman. And so he doesn't just punch and kick and say interesting things. He also uses his weapon systems and in a way that we haven't quite seen in a Hama G.I. Joe comic. So, and then on top of it, the art and the color is exciting and great. And Pat Brousseau, who is certainly lettering all of these word balloons in the computer, but there are all these sound effects, right? On pages 2 and 3, pock, pock, whack, crack, crack, pachong, koresh, and then the sound of the guidance system warming up, right? Or the missiles coming in. I'm not sure which it is, but B, B, V, 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 R, 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 R. Those look hand-drawn, although I think they're hand-drawn in the computer, like with a mouse or with a stylus. I don't think they're hand-drawn on paper and scanned, but maybe. And in a recent Facebook comment on the Talking Joe Facebook page, Greg Augustin was wondering what we all thought of some of the sound effects in Energon Universe G.I. Joe issue 2. And that is a different continuity, and that's a different comic with different, rules and expectations. But oh man, do the sound effects here certainly feel like Marvel 80s G.I. Joe sound effects, but they also look like them. Mark?
Indeed, yeah. I think the observation was the G.I. Joe issue 2 from the Energon universe. The sound effects like bang, bang, bang from a fang firing seemed very pedestrian, and there's certainly a very different dynamic to this. It's a lot more of the inventive onomatopoeia, the invention of words that aren't real words, representing all of these very explosive events and kinetic battles of Pachong and Kresh and all of the rest of it. It was very satisfying and sort of very very organic and integrated into the art. Very effective use of sound effects there. Last month when we were talking about issue 311 and how that ended, you sort of put your Nostradamus hat on and predicted that you thought there might be an extended fight sequence between Serpentor and Destro, and you were definitely right on that one. It definitely delivered, and as you say, a very extended mano a mano sequence between the two of them, the likes of which is very rare to see in a Joe book where there's such an extended focus on two characters fighting.
I'm always aware of artists drawing backgrounds and not drawing backgrounds, and sort of a general idea in comics that, after you draw a background or two, you can drop out the backgrounds for a few panels or pages, particularly if it's a fight and the sort of specific location becomes less important for a few moments. If it's just two guys punching and they're not in a tiny room or on a staircase, right? If they're on a field of rubble, right, we need to check in with the burning tank that's on its side 20 feet away. But we don't need to see that every panel. And Mooneyham does a nice job here of balancing my desire to know exactly where these characters are in relationship to some of this debris, right? That first page, right, it's great. The Destro and Serpentor Khan are grappling. There's a great looking burnt out hiss behind them, and then some foreground dead cyborg mutant vipers. We're not saying zombies anymore, right? And also an active flame on the left side. And Segala subtly separates the two characters with color, because the color in Destro's costume, where he's not inked black, is a warm and cool sort of purple, whereas the base color of Serpentor Khan, where he's not shaded, is a sort of a muddy orange, and then we just get these satisfying sort of hits. But when we need to know where we are again, when Serpentor Khan throws Destro, and he throws him an exaggerated distance, and I feel like this is either that Serpentor Khan is a little bit stronger than normal people because of his DNA and genetic makeup, and also because it is an action comic and you just exaggerate things like that. I did wonder, in terms of this fight and Destro sort of not punching back, it's not that he's taking it. I think initially he's actually sort of outclassed as a hand-to-hand fighter, and that's fine. That doesn't feel like a betrayal. But I thought, wait, didn't Destro lose his hands in issue like 257 and get like robot hands replaced during the artificial intelligence arc? And then I immediately thought two things. One, I think everyone's forgotten that. And also, that's fine. Because I didn't love that. And if Hama's going to do something with it, then it should come up again and people can talk about it. But I don't think Hama's going to do anything about it. So, yeah, let's just kind of forget it. And that does not feel like a terrible continuity error. Also, as this issue reads, there is no specific moment where he needs to sort of hold up a sort of much heavier weight than a normal person could, and we would need to be reminded of that. But I was aware of it.
Yeah, and we've not seen that in such a long time that it might even be a case that Hama has forgotten the fact that he had replaced Destro's hands with these robot detachable hands at this point, unless he was reminded. And oh yeah, I did do that.
I do have confidence that if the story needed to call it out, consultant Diana Davis, A, remembers, B, would bring it up, and C, it would work its way into a bit of dialogue if need be.
Yes, I will grasp you with my Molly Steel hands. Right.
So on page 5, before the big splash page explosion, end of a character, Destro kind of names the airplane that we were curious about in the previous issue. He calls it the Mars-built VTOL bomber/transports. And I am imagining Hasbro marketing and maybe Larry Hama. I think the vehicles were more Hasbro marketing, and the characters were more Hama in terms of naming in the 80s. But I could be wrong. I'm imagining 5 or 6 people in Rhode Island and New York coming up with an acronym or just a cool name for this plane based on those words.
Yeah, it's maybe it's the Viper. No, we've got Viper. I was going to say, I can't have a Viper. But the let's say Viper jet, VTOL, Intercept, plane.
The VBT, the VTOL bomber transport. VBT. Maybe it just needs a word like dominator and like despoiler. Oh, I think it needs a D word, because Destro. We do not. Listeners, please chime in the comments and send us a voice memo, and we'll send it on to Hasbro and SKYBOUND. And you'll be famous and you'll never get paid.
Let us know your best Destro themed acronym for this VTOL bomber transport. And did you see as well that he referenced the Pave Penny system in the plane? And I thought to myself, is this a made-up thing? Is he naming it after a real person? I looked it up. Pave Penny is a real-life thing developed by Lockheed Martin. It's a laser spotter tracker, which is carried by Air Force attack aircraft and fighter bombers to enable them to track a laser spot on the ground. It's a receiver which allows the pilot to see which targets may be attacked by any laser-guided bombs that they carry. So what is happening here is that Destro is painting Serpentor as the target with the laser in his eye. The VTOL is then receiving that, tracking that targeting of Serpentor, and is using that as its targeting to launch its missiles.
Does that mean that, or you just said Destro's painting Serpentor Khan as a target with his eye, and we see panel 1 on page 5. It's the sliver vertical panel of just Destro's face. He's got blood coming out of his mouth, from his lips, right? A little orangey. But then there's this sort of reddish reflection sort of on and around his eye, which is matched in the next panel from the plane above him. And then we have a close-up in the third panel of the actual targeting device on the bottom of the plane. Are you saying that Destro has some technology in his helmet, or is wearing contact lenses? He's physically with his eye in looking at Serpentor Khan, right? So the red light, I sort of thought that the red light that was hitting Serpentor Khan on the bottom of page 4, because it's a diagonal, I thought it was coming from above, from that plane. And then I sort of thought that the sort of 3-circle flash on Destro at the beginning of page 5 is sort of a reflection and not literally on or coming out of his helmet. I thought he was like, I'm designating you as the target. He's saying this in a general sense, like I'm having the plane do it. Like my guy up there is listening to me, or the pilot or something.
Yeah, I think the storytelling on this one, it could be a bit clearer, but yeah, I'm designating you at the target, I think he's being specific that it is him doing the designating with his eye. The equipment itself, the Pave Penny, doesn't produce a laser beam and isn't used to designate targets itself. It's designed to pick up other people on the ground painting the target with a laser. So what it is, I think, meant to be showing here is Destro doing the designation, and then the VTOL picking up that targeting on its own sensors.
Okay. I'm just going to jump back to Pat Brosseau's lettering for a moment. There are 2 bits where something is slightly in front of a word balloon, and I really like it. On page 3, when Serpentor Khan hits Destro, and the sound effect is pachong, and he says, "A great Khan has to earn his position, ... A little bit of his foot, Serpentor Khan's foot, is in front of the word balloon. And I think that's because Pat Brosseau is trying to place this word balloon that's got a whole sentence, right? And the panel doesn't have a lot of obvious negative space where you can put this word balloon without covering up something either important or sort of making it awkward, right? If he puts the word balloon down a little bit, it's sort of on Destro's leg in a way that you don't want. If you put it in the top left of the panel, you cover that white swoosh showing Serpentor Khan's arm movement. And similarly, there's no room on the right side of the panel. So maybe the best place is in the bottom left of that panel, but you gotta slightly overlap with Serpentor's foot. But it's not distracting. It's sort of fun. And then this page we're talking about with the laser painting and the VTOL, Destro says in the second panel of page 5, and the Pave Penny system. So he's got 3 word balloons. The first 2 are stuck to each other, and then there's an extender which connects to the final third word balloon, such is the way of modern combat. And a little wisp of smoke goes in front of that extender. And, on the previous page, a little wisp of smoke doesn't go in front of Destro's word balloon. And this is such a small thing, but I feel like this is a good example of what separates a great letterer from a good letterer or an okay letterer. that there are like 100 just small decisions happening in every issue with word balloon placement and sort of finessing. And I appreciate those.
Yeah, good observation. What was interesting about this sequence as well was around Destro's language and the colloquialisms that Harmer employs in the sequence as well. It feels like Destro is often sat back. He's a laird, almost aristocracy, and sort of talking in that very commanding voice. And I'm always imagining the animation of him having that deep booming voice, and a lot of the time he's talking in that normal voice, particularly when he's getting into the technicalities. I'm designating you as the target. But I think the emotions and the fact that he's actually in physical combat, having the tar beaten out of him effectively, I think everything is a lot closer to the surface. He's got these he's under duress. He's thinking about Baroness specifically as well, and as such he's sort of slipping into more of a Scottish brogue, and there's multiple instances of that employed, particularly in this fight. He says, "Monkey Bampot, have a taste of Highland headbutt." So here, Bampot, Scottish slang meaning an idiot, and Highland headbutt, probably you can figure out what that one is. So the Scottish Highland heed, a headbutt there. And then a bit later he says, bold words for one who looks like he's been duking for chips with his face. Brilliant turn of phrase there. Duking for chips with his face. That means that he's talking about his Serpentor's bleeding face, resembling that of a person who may have dipped his face into boiling hot oil to steal chips while they're still cooking in a chip pan.
And then there's one more, right, at the end with the Baroness?
Yeah, there's another one later on. He says, "Where is this the one you're referring to? Where is the Gleitnjaf?"
Yes.
When I first read, I thought I don't think this is really popular lexicon. I don't think it's an expression that is very familiar to many people outside of Scotland. And when I originally saw that dialogue balloon, I actually wondered to myself, and he's shouting and sort of looking a bit, out of sorts, very angry, everything is very raw. Maybe it's sort of lapsing into local vernacular rather than his normal, highfalutin lordship type speech. So Gleitnjaf means essentially stupid little weirdo, or contemptible person. So he's talking about a Cobra Commander when he's doing that. Where is the that idiot Cobra Commander essentially? But when I saw that dialogue balloon initially, I was like, what does that mean? Is he glitching out? Like, are we getting a call back to that bit where he was brainwashed by Revanche and that was under their control? Is this kind of like a real callback? And he's sort of having where is the like that? I'm turning into a robot. It did throw me a little bit because it is such a specific and unusual expression.
I'm gonna just hop back to lettering for a moment. This is a small thing on page 6, the amazing splash page where a character leaves this series forever. The sound effect is Kathoom, and it looks great. Just a little thing. The second O looks like a D. Okay.
So this page, let's talk about this page, shall we?
Sure. Yeah. So go for it.
So this is an amazing splash page. It's got Destro in the foreground, sort of silhouetted against that explosion, and Serpentor in the background with lots of colour holds, lots of oranges, and sort of holding out his arms, stretched, almost, I guess platoon style, sort of falling to his knees. And it's so all sorts of iconography there in that. And later on, he is described as being obliterated. So I think what we are seeing here is the end of Serpentor Khan, which was quite unexpected for me. I wasn't expecting this to actually be the end of him, but it looks like it is. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was a little surprised when it happened, even though so much at the end of the previous issue and the 5 pages here preceding points to this. You know, sometimes we're ready for Hama to continue a plot thread or pause it to introduce a B plot or a C plot. And maybe we forget that he's just going to wrap something up and kill off a character or kill off a character in grand fashion. I was sort of going back and forth as I was taking in this page because I thought, on the one hand, Hama had put some care into this character, right? So when this character was created in the late 290s of the IDW run, right? 2.5 years ago, it was a surprise, right? I thought that Serpentor was definitely not coming back. You thought he probably was. I don't think either of us thought that someone who wasn't really Serpentor was coming back as Serpentor. And this character of Serpentor, right? I'm thinking of My Dinner with Serpentor in yearbook, is it yearbook 3? And Serpentor Khan allows Hama to do something that I think he likes to do in his stories, which is impart a little history lesson now and then. You know, if Wolverine and Puck time travel to Spain a couple hundred years ago in, what is it, like issue 33 of Wolverine? I forget. That is Hama creating a different space for the characters to interact in that is unusual. It's not Madripoor, it's not, you know, the X Mansion, and also to like impart some history and also maybe have a parallel, you know? It's like, well, what would this character do during the Spanish Civil War, right? It's like, well, when were pizzas invented, Serpentor? Are they from ancient Rome? This is my recollection of My Dinner with Serpentor. I have not read it in a while. Here, in the first 5 pages, there are these it's 2 sentences that are kind of the same history lesson, where Destro says to Serpentor Khan, in your previous existence, you slaughtered and plundered your way from the China Sea to the Caspian. And then Serpentor Khan says on page 3, I fought my way across Asia and well into Europe with bow, lance, sword, and fists. A great Khan has to earn his position with martial prowess, right? And then he turns it into an insult instead of inheriting it along with ancestral wealth, you know, Destro. And Hama's not showing off. I think he's just adding spice. And so you have this grand character who has posed a real threat to every faction in the G.I. Joe sort of world. And I think on the one hand, this character always had to die because it's sort of confusing or complicated, right? It's Serpentor, but it's not Serpentor. It's someone else, but it's also someone else who's like inherently not a G.I. Joe character. It's not Zanzibar. It's not General Flag. It's not, you know, Billy. It's like a clone, but this other guy. And on the other hand, I think Hama had such a powerful threat in this character who so immediately takes over a faction of Cobra and so directly attacks Cobra and Cobra Commander. And I wondered sort of how far Hama might take that, you know, like, oh, well, sometimes anniversary issues like 50 and to a lesser extent 100 and 200. I love 200. Sometimes they have a big fight or a big battle. Like, oh, is Serpentor Khan going to build up to 325? Like, nope, he's out of the book at 312. And then I thought about the logic that writers sometimes use when killing a character. It's like, well, a character has served their function. And so if they stick around, they're just a distraction. So either they need to leave or die. And then the third thing that I thought was, Hama's making this up as he goes. And I don't think when he was writing 310 that he thought, yeah, Serpentor Khan's got about 2 issues left in him, or an issue and a quarter, I should say. And, you know, I bet by the time he was on, you know, page 2 of this issue, Hama was figuring that Serpentor Khan was going to die. I think when he says, I don't know what's going to happen on the next page until I write the current page, I believe that 85%. I think Hama has a sense of what's happening in a page or two, and you might also change what happens 1 or 2 pages ago. But we really want Destro to win. And if Serpentor Khan is going to win, then Destro's either going to die, which is not going to happen, or be egregiously injured, which I don't think the sort of story logic points to, because Baroness just was. And more interesting than Serpentor Khan against Cobra Commander is Destro against Cobra Commander. And that's not the first time that's happened in the series. And that is the kind of thing which I don't mind recurring in this series. So from sort of story logic, I love this page. From, as you were describing, from an art perspective, oh man, Chris Mooneyham totally knocks it out of the park. And I generally don't like it when artists sign interior pages. I find it's a little distracting. In older comics, artists would sometimes sign the first page, like the big panel on the first page. I'm thinking of EC comics in the 50s. And that's totally fine because those comics didn't have credits, and that was sort of the closest they could get. I do think if you're going to do it, this is the page to do it, because it's a page that acts like a cover, and you are definitely supposed to slow down and take in this page and to sort of get to the bottom right and see Mooneyham and also Sagala, right? Sign it. That's them like taking a little bit of a bow, like if it was Mooneyham's final issue, he could totally sign the final panel. But, I'd like the next panel, page 7, Springfield Main Shopping District, where we're looking past a hiss and a stinger. Like, I don't want Sagala to sign, I don't want Mooneyham to sign that panel. And then you made a good point about Serpentor Khan's pose on page 6. And I'm trying to intuit what Hama's plot describes here, right? So I'm sure he's using a word like expanding, roiling arc of incendiary death and fury obliterates Serpentor Khan. And I bet that Hama does describe the pose. I don't know that he makes a reference to the film Platoon, but I bet he describes some kind of attitude or physical pose, and Mooneyham either ran with it or made a call and changed it, but sort of plussed it. And the fact that we get to see that Destro is seeing it, we're behind Destro, we see it and we see Destro seeing it, makes it doubly satisfying. And, the background drops out except for some foreground debris that Destro is standing on. It's just great. And then 1/3 of the entire page is a sound effect, right? But it's transparent, so you can enjoy all the speed lines of, smoke and death on the top of the page. And the scene cuts there, right? We don't get 2 more panels of like Destro turning around and saying the like zinger. That's all we need. And to the extent that we're always worried about characters surviving incredible attacks or getting away, it does leave a little bit of a question in your mind that on the next page, someone doesn't definitively say, oh, Serpentor Khan just got killed, right? Or Destro doesn't say it. And so for a couple pages, you're like, all right, I'm 99% sure that character just got blown up and is not coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's the dialogue later on from Cobra Commander and the Televiper that kind of help clarify the fact that probably is the end at the end of it for Serpentor Khan. And as you sort of indicate, I think if he weren't to bow out in such an explosive way, then he'd be there as a background character and potentially sort of a distraction. And if they are looking to kind of essentially wrap up this phase of the overall story and begin with a sort of a fresh arc, essentially with 316, that by taking a character this significant off the board, it sort of does allow for that slightly more fresh start to be there.
Speaking of the next page, Mark, the cyborg mutated, is it sort of frag viper who's leading this unit of mutated Cobra soldiers. What is his backpack? What are those two sort of canisters sticking up over his shoulders? Is Mooneyham just sort of in a fun way? This is not a criticism. He's just sort of like making up stuff for their weapons and gear.
Probably. Yeah, the Frag Viper toy does have quite a big backpack with a hose coming off it that feeds his grenade thrower thing. So I think it is taking inspiration from that. It does have like these protuberances on the top of the backpack by the looks of things that kind of indicate kind of grenades on the top of the backpack or something along the... The backpack can have, it looks like grenades stored onto the top of the backpack. So I think it's taking inspiration,
like
but
pegs.
kind of doing its own thing. Yeah, like pegs, yeah.
Yeah. Mooneyham gets sort of my permission to mutate and cyborgize both the sort of human bodies of the Vipers and also their gear. But I don't think it makes logical sense that their gear is also... like expanded and changed. I feel like, sort of the surprise or the horror would be to see someone limping along or like running fast like a scary zombie, wearing the normal clothes and with the normal gear. And your brain says, wait, I recognize that. Oh, wait, something about that is off, as opposed to 100% of it has been turned into a monster. At the same time, if they're all much bigger and they all have like weird shoulder pads and like weird sort of enlarged weapons, it does at a glance make the visual that much clearer which faction it is, and that might go a long way here.
Okay, so we're moving on to these Cobras going through the Springfield main shopping district and deciding to move on to the hospital. I thought there was possibly a slight missed opportunity here where they could have reminded us that they were these sort of mutated troopers and not just the normal ones. So, they'd been established originally as being mutated with a taste for human flesh, the forbidden meat. So I would have quite enjoyed if they had a line of dialogue, something along the lines of, well, we could go to the hospital. There'll be some nice easy pickings for a quick snack along the way, or something along those lines.
But these characters aren't really zombies anymore, right? Over the last 5 issues, the zombie thing has been downplayed and I think dropped in favor of the cyborg thing. And I don't know if that's because the sort of parallel of zombies in G.I. Joe from Skybound, the publisher of Walking Dead, became sort of too distracting or like not a funny sort of pun, or if just any notion of someone eating someone else in G.I. Joe was decided to be not quite G.I. Joe. But I hear you, but I do feel like they're kind of not zombies anymore. Because we haven't used that word in 2 issues, and wasn't there a sort of a funny correction in the letters page 4 issues ago? Didn't maybe? It was
they've definitely backed away from the zombie word. But speaking of words, we do get some words from Snake Eyes here in this sequence.
Snake Eyes talking, Snake Eyes talk. Talking about things he wants to say.
So we've not heard from Snake Eyes for a couple of issues. Here he has 3 speech balloons. As the mutant Cobras approach the emergency room, he says, "None shall pass," in that voice. Then he says, then there's a great line of dialogue from this Frag Viper. "Ha ha, they're all armed with medieval weapons and power tools. Not a single modern firearm between them. We'll roll through them like a mechanical reaper in a field of wheat." And Snake Eyes replies, "Let's roll." Final line from him is, in reply to Storm Shadow, "You called it sword, brother. No quarter, Tommy.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
And while we're talking about dialogue, actually, my favourite line of dialogue from the entire book, probably from Dawn, these cyborgs are already half dead. I'm just making them deader. Shook, 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 chopping off the tops of their heads.
If you were curious about my comment that some of Pat Brusso's sound effects looked hand-lettered, look at the shook, shook, shook in this panel of Dawn chopping the tops of 3 heads off. That is definitely the black letters with the white outlines. Those are definitely computer fonts, whereas the SHK, the shook above that in the second panel, looks very much hand-lettered. This page, the sequence is memorable because we don't often see Joes and Cobras or Joes and Dreadnoks working together, but also not only do their idiosyncratic weapons get called out, right, which is Hama, I think, sort of having fun with everything about G.I. Joe. It's like, oh, right, these characters do have like baseball bats, right? They don't have like machine guns, right? Like Hasbro's had this weird variety since the beginning. But also each of these characters then uses their weapon, right? And that's something I always want to see in comics. I don't want to see Batman fire missiles and machine guns from the Batmobile, even though he keeps doing that in movies. I'm pretty sure a missile killed his parents, and he's like, I'll never ever pick up a missile. Something like that. I can't remember. But
missiles are a cowardly lot. Something like that. Yeah.
Storm Shadow has swords.
I shall become.
I should become a missile. Storm Shadow has a sword, 2 swords, and he uses them. Snake Eyes has a sword and he uses them. What does Scarlet use? In this one panel, she uses her crossbow and a throwing star. And that might seem like a small thing. And in the original toy, this throwing stars do not come off of her arm. They're just sculpted on and painted on. But this one panel for her and this one sequence for all these characters, right?
If only she had if she only had a third arm to use her slingshot, that would have just
Then you turn the page and 4 Dreadnoks specifically use their own personal Dreadnok weapons. And in the case of 3 of them, those are their names. And we haven't seen a lot of this, right? We often don't see the Dreadnoks very specifically use their weapons. And, it's not even worth saying G.I. Joe as a brand is toyetic, because G.I. Joe is a toy brand. Of course it's toyetic. Buzzer didn't come with
a laser rifle. No.
And a laser rifle. He didn't come with the Frag Viper's, highlight glove thing and backpack, right? He comes with a chainsaw, and I always want to see him use a chainsaw. And when I played games with my brother with our G.I. Joe toys, I would have Buzzer use his chainsaw. And so A, this is really fun and satisfying. B, they get to use these weapons in harsh and dramatic ways because they are fighting zombies or cyborgs, right? I don't think this scene would play out if these were regular Cobra soldiers. There is a lot of decapitating and chopping in half, both up, down, and also left, right. And there's a lot of red splatter. And I don't know if it's blood. I think it is. But this is a little contrast to something I didn't talk about at the beginning of the episode, Andy Kubert and Tamara Bonvillain's cover, where all the liquid on the Jinx's weapons is green.
Predator blood.
Predator blood. And it's totally fine, right? Like Hasbro was not going to let a G.I. Joe cover, even with it's clearly monsters, right? Hasbro's not going to let a G.I. Joe cover in 1986 or in 2024 have that much blood on bladed weapons, right? And so what's the solution? You make it brown like it's oil, or you make it green like it's from zombies, right? And so there's this sort of, it's not even continuity because the cover is not real, but in the scene, all these zombies or cyborgs have red blood in them, not green blood. And it's just fun and satisfying to see these horrible characters that were about to do something horrible They're about to go into a hospital and kill the wounded, which, according to the Geneva Convention, you cannot do. And the Joes and the Dreadnoks take them out, and it's righteous. And this whole issue feels like sort of justice or righteous vengeance. Destro takes out Serpentor Khan, right? Do not injure my love. And the Joes with their elegant swords and the Dreadnoks with their inelegant, bladed and jagged and stick weapons take out these. And it's just 2 pages, each with 3 panels. And Hama does something that I feel like I and many other people want to happen like every other issue for the last 39 years. I want Joes to use their weapons in very specific ways. You know, like I want Freefall to parachute in. I want Wetsuit to not be dressed sort of like Muskrat on land. I want Wetsuit to be underwater. And then, you know, sort of the peak here is when the 2 plots of the issue so far converge, when the mutated cyborg Frag Viper, when his head blows up because Destro, who has just finished with this big battle on the first 6 pages, when he gets to the hospital, and you know he doesn't have a like yeah sort of zinger line. Before he does it, he just says, "You're in my way," and after he does it, he doesn't say like, "That'll teach Serpentor Khan not to mess with my lady," or you know, Cobra Commander and Serpentor Khan make for strange bedfellows. He doesn't, you know...
That Frag Viper's got no head for battle.
Right. When Worf says assimilate this in Star Trek First Contact, I'm sorry, I don't like that line. It's really fun, but it's distracting. And Destro does not do that here, right? It's not cheap. It's not broad, right? He's on a mission here. He needs to find his love who's in danger. And he just asks the question, where is she? So sort of all over again, the issue is satisfying.
Just to rewind a tad on that Dreadnought page, that was one of the pages that essentially made me cheer out for joy when I saw it. It's such a satisfying page. And there's a couple of elements just to highlight there. One is that Ripper has got these jaws of life, and what Mooneyham is doing here is sort of like innovating the ways that those work. So it's like a wrist held device, like almost like a power glove that he's using here, which is like a really cool usage of it. And there's also just so much personality in there, both in the way that it's drawn, but also from the dialogue. Buzzer says, "I hate cyborgs more than cages." Cages being biker slang for a car driver, because you're surrounded by a cage. And Torch, let's not forget, is an Australian. I think he was in the Melbourne Maulers or something like that on the back of his file card. And he says, "I'm putting Borgs on the Barbie. I'm putting Borgs on the Barbie, mate. You having fun, Road Pig?" He's Borgs on the Barbie. It's sort of like a typical Australian bit of fun that whenever you sort of trying to tease someone who's Australian, you might say, "Put more shrimps on the Barbie, mate." Here he's putting cyborgs on the Barbie. Then when we see Road Pig smashing that head off the cyborg with his cinder block club, he's in Donald personality. Again, so much personality. Indubitably fantastic stuff.
And that weapon of Road Pig's is such that you can't use it much in this comic because it's going to do too much damage. Like, I understand that all the Cobras have machine guns and a bullet does a lot of damage, but in the sort of logic of a G.I. Joe comic, you know, when Lady J gets shot or when Hawk gets shot, they recover from that. But if you're a Joe and Road Pig hits you, you know, I think that's sort of visceral in a different way. And it's like, oh, that character's out of the book for 2 years because their shoulder's all messed up, or they're going to lose a hand. Is this the first time we have seen Ripper's Jaws of Life? Because you've commented before that his original toy comes with that sort of weapon, even though it was never used in the cartoon, right? He has a different weapon instead. And I know that you have paid some attention to Dreadnought appearances in G.I. Joe comics, Mark.
Yeah, I think it hasn't really appeared very much. It's featured quite prominently on the Jason Howard Cobra Commander second printing that he has with Ripper on the front cover, where he's sort of carrying them in a much more prominent way than they ever have before. I think
this continuity.
Yeah, in this continuity, I can't recall it being shown, and I can't recall it being used in this sort of handheld, wrist-mounted kind of format before. I think this is new, but please do let me know if I'm mistaken there.
Snake Eyes has one more line of dialogue on the page turn where Destro says, "Where is she?" And it's funny, I was starting to think, oh, now Snake Eyes is talking too much. I feel like that line of dialogue, Zartan is on his way down with her. That could have belonged to one of the other Joes in this scene. That could have been Scarlet or Storm Shadow.
It is pointing a little bit closer to Scarlet than than Snake Eyes.
Oh, okay. Pat Brousseau. And then on the next page, I have been hard on Chris Mooneyham's artwork in the past, where I see only 1-point perspective or optical perspective and not a lot of 2-point perspective and maybe never 3-point perspective. And here is a big panel with 3-point perspective as we are looking down at the hospital, and we can very clearly see all the Joes, all the Dreadnoughts, 2 Dreadnought vehicles. Baroness has just been wheeled out, which was established 2 panels ago. We can see that same emergency entrance to the hospital, which we saw on the previous page and the page before that and 2 pages before that. And we can see a whole bunch of the hospital building. So I get a sense of its shape and size, how tall it is, how the sort of entrance sticks out. And very clearly 3 different Destro vehicles are coming in, and they've got sound effects, and there's a light source. And I really love this panel. And if I'm being really traditional, I might want this kind of panel earlier in the scene to establish, that the Joes and the Dreadnoughts are in front of the hospital and sort of how the hospital looks, rather than the straight on view that we get, that panel where you had Snake Eyes say, "None shall pass." But I'm not so traditional that you can't partially establish and then sort of better reestablish a little later. Regardless of the order, I really love this panel, and I'm really excited that Mooneyham draws this 3-point perspective here, pulls the camera back, whether it's 3-point or 2-point, right? Just pulls the camera back to give us a really clear view of where everyone is. Because there are artists who, either because they're less skilled or in a hurry, would have the camera much closer and would have just a little bit of those 3 Destro vehicles coming into the panel to show that they're landing in place, with sound effects, and maybe some dialogue would be needed to make it clearer. And so this is the hardest way to draw this story moment, and Mooneyham does it.
Yeah, and Mooneyham's drawing the heck out of that Dominator as well, isn't he? He's not taking any shortcuts.
Yes. And then we cut back to the community center, and we pick back up with Cobra Commander and the character who looks like Cobra Commander and who's not. And I wanted to know what you think of the final 5 or 6 pages of the issue, because things keep coming to a head.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We've got this Cobra Commander imposter, and I think he, in my mind, he was always going to come to a sticky end, either in the battle itself or from Cobra Commander being jealous. And I think, Cobra Commander, seeing how brave this guy was, and that natural jealousy wasn't ever going to necessarily welcome him completely back into the fold, knowing that probably much more charismatic a leader than he was. So not entirely unsurprising that he does meet an end, and Destro, I guess, going for impact in his fighting style rather than necessarily completely battling with honor. Both Serpentor painted up with guided missiles, and in this case again, he's disarming himself, literally by shooting his weapons off his arms, but into the air, but guided again with a guidance suite. Is that the right way to pronounce it? Sweet?
Not a guidance suit.
Yeah, a guidance system in his mask, which brings down those risk rockets onto the head of the poor CG. Another very handsome explosion there with Destro framed in silhouette in the foreground as the explosion occurs in the front of him. And Tim, you alluded to this. The very next panel, he is brushing his shoulder. This time, he is not brushing dirt off. He is brushing that CG off of him by the looks of things.
Yes, I'm struck by. Here's an art thing. I feel like in the final run of pages, Mooneyham might be looking for a few shortcuts, because I note that there's a big panel with no background on page 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and effectively 18 and 20. And I think those are okay and even earned, because on each of these pages in another panel, there are clear descriptions of where a character is. So, for example, on page 14, I think this is my favorite line of the issue, when the Telehyper says, "We don't know where Destro is," and Cobra Commander, in the thing that I'm not sure is his costume from issue 55 or actually how he looks, the glasses, the beret, the goatee, or the Fu Manchu, and the wig or the hair, but he says, "He's coming here, you idiot!" But he's angry and not panicking. A little panic. I do think that big panel could have a little bit of background, a little bit of that wall with the doorway or the buttons or the lights. Maybe the camera is swung around a little bit and it's that giant diagonal sort of monitor that's behind him. So that's okay. I don't need a background there. I do know where he is. And I haven't lost his spatial relationship to the other two Televipers. But it becomes a little bit of a rhythm where for the final run of pages in this issue, every page has a big panel with no background. So Cobra Commander with no background, Battle Armor Cobra Commander with no background, Destro close up with no background, and you could argue on that one there's no space for it. And then when Destro fires his missiles, no background. And then the explosion. This might be really insider baseball, but folks, page 18, where the sound effect is Thoom and Destro in silhouette is in front of the explosion that's taking out the Battle Armor Cobra Commander, looks like Jorge Zafino drew it. Punisher Kingdom Gone, Punisher Assassin's Guild. And it's amazing. This is a very simple panel, but graphically it's really striking. Really subtle color too. Technically that's a background, but it's sort of, I think it's safe to say that's an easier page to draw than the one with the hospital and all the vehicles. Page 19 is, sort of normal, hard, lots of information and backgrounds. And then effectively the final panel of the entire book on page 20, there's some smoke and there are some Joes in the background, but there isn't a descriptive space. And so this is not a criticism, this is an observation. It does feel like I could have 20% more art in the backgrounds at the end of this issue, though it is all clear, it is all satisfying. And it's also possible that in Hama's plot, he's calling out some big panels for Mooneyham to just draw a character having a badass moment. When Battle Armor Cobra Commander on page 15 holds up the Heat Viper's weapon, and I think he's holding it upside down, although, I'm sort of reminded, going back to, 1989? My brother and I weren't quite sure how the Heat Viper should hold its rocket launcher, even though the package painting describes one way. Also, I'm sure it works both ways.
Getting into the nitty-gritty of it, the supporting arm seems to suggest that it's held handle up to me, the way that the arm supports it and the hose then feeds back into the backpack. But I think I'm happy with a bit of an artistic interpretation to have it like a giant shotgun, as it kind of is here.
Yeah, it adds some oomph to the scene, and also a little bit of the idea that that the battle armor commander might be not desperate, but improvising a little bit. You just pick up whatever weapon you got and you just sort of grab it, hold on to it.
Last ditch attempt to kind of hold the line. Yeah.
And so going back to this comment, my top-down comment from the beginning, that, a couple of issues where more pieces are coming into place so that you can have a resolution, a big fight, or maybe several resolutions all in one issue. I thought that taking out Serpentor Khan on page 6 was sort of the big thing for the issue. But no, there's a second big thing, which by comparison is a small thing. Destro taking out the mutated, the cyborg Frag Viper. And then it happens again, where Destro takes out yet a third character that stands in his way. And so the theme of this issue, and Destro actually says it, "You're in my way." The theme of this issue is, do not get in Destro's way. Destro is going to have what's his, or Destro is going to protect what is important to him, right? In other issues, it might be his ancestral home. In, I can't remember exactly, Destro Search and Destroy in 116, 117, 118, but it's, if you threaten him, he'll fight back. And here it's the Baroness. Do not take or injure the Baroness. Destro will cut a swath to get her back. And I liked that Cobra Commander quote imposter, but I do think that somehow that character had to leave the series quickly, because that character wasn't going to sort of get promoted and become a rival to the Cobra Commander. He wasn't going to become the Overlord who's never shown up in Hama's book. He wasn't going to go back to being a normal Crimson Guardsman, right? He was probably going to disappear like Jeffrey the Televiper, fade away, or die. And the question is, who takes him out? Is it Cobra Commander because he's jealous? Is it a Joe because that's what Joes do? Is it Destro? Well, this is 312, and the title of this issue, I'm looking at the script, the title of this issue is "Don't Get in Destro's Way or Destro Will Blow You Up." And Destro does. And then the final 2 pages are just sort of a very satisfying sort of descending action after the final of these 3 blow-ups of people in Destro's way. And Destro is still a civilized and a gentleman, and everything he says on those final 2 pages is at odds with the savagery of his actions in the previous 18 pages, right? Where, I appreciate the gesture, but that will not be necessary. I intend to settle this mano a mano. He's being gentlemanly. Do not follow me inside, right? I don't need your help. You're only going to get in the way. You're not going to like what you see. And the threat, right, in the second to last panel, I know you have surveillance cams and mics, Cobra Commander. There are no exclamation marks in Destro's dialogue. In certainly the final pages. Is it the whole issue? Oh, well, certainly when he screams, "Where is the Glicknyaf?" But Destro is calm in the whole issue. And it's a real great, it's great character work, because who's angry and or panicking? Cobra Commander, right? It's great. And then sort of icing on the cake, right? I intend to settle this mano a mano. Do not follow me inside. And then 2 panels later, final line of the issue, he turns and calmly says to the Joe, "Ninjas and dreadnoks, who are all extremely capable," he says, "I suggest you all step back to the other end of the parking lot, as there will soon be a quantity of flying debris." Right? Hama's almost telling a joke here. Like, I think when you read this final page, you're both like, yeah, and also like laughing or chuckling. So, what an incredible issue. My only regret is that I think the cover wanted Destro on it. And not Jinx and Scarlet. They are in the issue, but barely. And this is very much Destro's issue. And he is on the cover of the next issue, so all is forgiven.
And a previous issue also had him on the front cover. 307 was a Destro cover.
Yeah, I mean, that one was more of a pinup and less of a story, whereas, this issue's cover was, even though it's sort of a general battle scene, it kind of does happen in this issue. It's not just them standing in front of a wall looking cool. So what a great issue.
Absolutely. Just a couple of things to call out. So just a reminder of a plot point. Why is Destro so angry with Cobra Commander? Sometimes these inter-faction bickerings can be a little bit tricky to retain with all of the different rivalries and factions and so on. So I just wanted to point out that in a previous issue, when Baroness was shot, that was at Cobra Commander's order. When he saw on his monitor Baroness and Zartan coming through, he said, "That's Baroness and Zartan. Destro is sticking his stainless steel beak in, and he's using the dreadnoughts as pawns. I'm going to send a message to that arrogant Scot. Televiper, patch me through to the CG in my battle armor. There's a change of plans. I want you to find Zartan and Baroness and blow them all away." So it was the CG that shot the Baroness on Cobra Commander's command. I don't think the Destro necessarily is aware of all of the detail of this, but certainly the CG got his just desserts at the hand of Destro, and Cobra Commander is to follow. And I had one more interesting colloquialism. This is Cobra Commander with his typically wonderful dialogue. He says, "What are you doing, you Eusanius Fichu? We don't want him prisoner, we want him dead." So I don't know the last time that you used Eusanius Fichu in general speech, Tim. It's been a few weeks for me. This is quite Shakespearean, definitely less common term than others. It means essentially a stupid polecat, skunk, or prostitute. Very Shakespearean insult. Not a lot of reference to it that I could necessarily find online.
The words that jumped out at me are in the letters page. Do you have anything else to say about the issue, or should I talk about
Do
the
go on, yep.
Letter writer Ollie Higgins makes a point that I really appreciate. He says in the letters page, "This series does not take itself too seriously, and yet it has a lot of action." And I thought, what a good point. We take it really seriously. I spend 2 hours a week talking about it, and I will spend a half hour talking about one cover, and I love it. And you know, certainly this is a brand that needs to be cared for, and this is the livelihood of several comics professionals, both working at Skybound and also freelancers, right? This is how they pay the bills, by making this work. But the actual sort of tone of this book, you know, yeah, there's some stuff where Hama might forget something, or he might have a plot that seems similar to a plot from before, like Destro getting really upset at Cobra Commander for trying to kill him. At the same time, Hama's winking a little bit at us when he writes these, plots these issues and writes this dialogue, because he knows this is just a little bit of entertainment every month with characters that are larger than life. You know, like, I always forget that someone who doesn't know G.I. Joe will look at Destro and sort of smirk or frown, because he looks like a very particular kind of villain, right? His shirt is not zipped up, and he's got a giant red collar and a metal mask. I look at him and I think, yeah, Destro, yeah. And someone else would look at him the way that, like, I look at Power Rangers and I think, aren't those costumes a little bright? You know, or I look at the monsters in Power Rangers and I think, those are a little exaggerated. Well, everyone who's not a G.I. Joe fan looks at G.I. Joe and says, you know, Shipwreck and Dr. Mindbender and Destro, these are fun. These guys look kind of silly. And, you know, a character like Road Pig having two personalities and liking donuts and grape soda, Cobra Commander having all these 10-cent words. Is that the figure of speech? All these $10 words. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Having all these $1,000 SAT words. That's Hama having fun writing. You know, this is not like Anakin Skywalker's fall at the end of Star Wars Episode 3 and like the great tragedy of that kind of betrayal. This is like the pulpy roots of Star Wars looking back to Buck Rogers and, you know, movie serials of the 1920s. So, okay, that's a good point from Ollie Higgins. It's true, every issue, I appreciate the reminder. And then later in his letter, Ollie Higgins asks about reprints of the IDW issues now that the Marvel issues are spoken for in the compendia. And editor Alex Antoni says, "We cannot confirm or deny the details of any future plans." And I'm looking at my crystal ball, and I think that we know that when IDW had the rights, IDW wanted to reprint everything Marvel had done and everything Devil's Due had done. And it stands to reason that for access to fans and for making money, Skybound would want to, sooner or later, reprint everything. The Marvel stuff, the Devil's Due stuff, the IDW stuff. But two things. One, there are now a lot of continuities for G.I. Joe. And since IDW had the rights for more than 15 years, there are just a lot more G.I. Joe comics. And so if Skybound's going to reprint all of them or more of them or those 150 issues that continue the Hama story, that's a big project and that's going to take a long time. From a market perspective, I have to wonder how much Skybound thinks there is interest in the Hama IDW run. Because yes, fewer people have those issues than the Marvel issues. And yes, people have written in and asked, some specifically about the final 20 or so issues, which never got any reprint, and some of whom are curious about all of them, particularly in an era when we're now used to compendia, 1,600-page, 1,200-page books that have 30, 40, 50, 60 issues at a time. But you could also argue the opposite. No, fewer people read the IDW issues because they're not as popular, maybe because they're not as good, and Skybound has to know that if they did a Kickstarter, like their 4 Marvel compendia for the IDW run, it would not do as well. That people really want the Marvel issues. They want them again. They want to give them as gifts. They want to have it in another format. But as much as people don't have the IDW issues, I don't hear a lot of people talking about the IDW issues. And when I go to conventions, people don't bring the IDW issues up to Hama to get signed nearly as much as the Marvel issues. So Skybound doesn't want to do a big reprint program that's only going to pay off a little bit. And also, I think Skybound thinks that the IDW issues are only okay, or maybe not great. And Skybound wants to associate. This is just my thinking. I have no inside information. I think Skybound does not want to be affiliated with sort of lesser work. And by some metrics, the IDW Real American Hero is a lesser work than the Marvel issues and certainly the new Skybound issues. And though it's sort of a glaring hole if Skybound doesn't get around to reprinting the IDW Hama G.I. Joe issues, sort of aesthetically and from a business standpoint, to me, it does make sense.
Indeed.
One last thing. The second letter is from someone named Ben Smith, who's retired U.S. Air Force. And that is not the Ben Smith who was an original art dealer in New York in the early 2000s and who sold some of Larry Hama's artwork. I believe this is a different Ben Smith. Just a coincidence. There are two people named Ben Smith who are G.I. Joe fans.
Very good. An observation for me for the letter page, we get confirmation that the next arc starts with issue 316. They're very excited to announce what they've got coming up in April next year, so looking forward to whatever that will be. And also an observation that the letters page is talking about issues 305 and 306, which were issues 1 and 2 of the Paul Pelletier era of the, which, given that we are now at 312 with a skip month in there, that is basically 7 months ago as we read it now. So there's a bit of a lag, a long lag in the letters page here between what is being commented on by letter writers versus what we are seeing in print this month.
Yeah, usually when you read in issue 1 of a comic, they say, no letters page, we don't have any letters yet. And then issue 2, they say, No letters yet. We're just sending issue 1 off to press. We'll probably have letters in issue 3. Sometimes in issue 2 or 3, they have sent out previews of issue 1 and gotten some advance response. But generally, if you're reading issue 3 or 4 of a comic, you're getting comments about issue 1. And this does feel notably behind, but I've gotten used to it, so that's okay. Also, if in editing or assistant editing this book, they put together a book that is this good, and the letters page is good, even if it's just lagging behind. If this is the one thing that sort of gets a little less attention, that's okay by me. If this is the one place where they're, scrambling and, on a bigger lag, that's fine. I do want to point out that final sentence from Alex Antoni in the letters page where he says, "I'm, capital letters, so excited to announce what we've got coming up in April of next year. It's going to blow your minds." Okay, Alex Antoni, the last time you teased something, you're like, Chris Mooneyham's working on something incredible. Like, oh, do you mean just more issues of this very good comic? Because you didn't say spin-off or extra issues, but my mind starts running when you say things like, "You're not going to believe," and "so excited," and "blow your minds." So I understand that in the post Stan Lee Marvel 1960s era, the sort of editorial speech of comics is like, circus ringmaster making big announcements and promising the moon, like, "Gather round, dear readers. Lo, you have never read a story starring Ben Grimm, the ever-loving thing, like you have this month." Well, since last month, Stan.
Excelsior!
Right. I get it. That's how you talk, right? Like this summer's X-Men crossover is going to blow last summer's X-Men crossover out of the water. But most of the history of G.I. Joe is no spinoffs and just good issues after good issues or okay issues after okay issues. So if by blow my minds, you mean like issues 3, 16, and 17, and 18, and 19 are going to be more excellent issues, great. I don't think that's blowing my mind. So Alex Antoni, either deliver on some mind-blowing news, please, or just tell me it's going to keep being awesome. But I don't know that it can get more awesome if it's this. It sounds terrible. This is how spoiled I am now by the high level of Skybound quality. It's like, oh, another excellent issue of Real American Hero. Okay. And with that, my Yo Joage mark is, I don't know, an 8 or a 9. This issue, so much happens and so much converges in a way that I wasn't quite hoping for, wasn't quite expecting. Felt a little bit like issue 50, right, of the Marvel run. And a little bit personal like issue 200, where Duke and Cobra Commander square off. There are 2 small coloring mistakes. Destro's missiles aren't red in one panel, and the Hiss turret is all, the gun pod up top is all red for some reason. Anyway.
It's a Hiss 2.
Yeah, but it's drawn like a Hiss 1.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I'm sure that's like a Hiss 7, that it's some convention exclusive from 2012, I don't remember. Anyway, I think this issue is an 8, and because the cover is good, not my favorite, and because it's a 20-page comic and not a 22-page comic, like they all should be, it's not a 9, but emotionally it's a 9. So I give this issue an 8. Mark?
I think I am going 9. I really enjoyed it. I got a real kick out of this issue for all of the reasons that we have listed. So yeah, great issue. Really good. So
coming up on Talking Joe, Devils do.
Hey,
we have to do Reloaded. We haven't done Sigma 6.
So just a reminder that welcome your feedback onto the discussion. You can join in the discussion at Facebook, or you can head on over to our website, talkingjoe.co.uk is that website. At the bottom of the page is a link to leave us a voicemail. So if you think you have got a great name for the Mars VTOL bomber transport, then let us know over there. Would those be better than the Devil, Destro's Eliminator VTOL Intercept Liftoff, or the Violator, the VTOL Intercept Assault Intercept Articulated Transport Ordnance Relay. Devil and Violator. Beat that.
Please help with your suggestions, dear listeners.
We are also on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Patreon. Patreon.com/TalkingJoe, where you can support us like the cool kids. Richard, Sam, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, and Mike, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content and bonus festive cheer, just because that's the kind of guys they are. Head on over there. Tim, where can people find you when you are not dusting G.I. Joe comics with a little layer of Christmas cheer?
My YouTube channel, Atomic Abe, has video essays on TV and film, like the Flintstones spin-offs and Kate and Allie, the 90s, 80s CBS sitcom. I am often at my brick and mortar comic book store in Massachusetts, Hub Comics, and I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent stuff. And Tim, what do you think is the hot Christmas purchase this season?
G.I. Joe Compendium 1.
Very good.
Actually, we have sold some, not quite as many as I thought, which might be a testament to how many people got the hardcovers from the Kickstarter. Also, I know you can find it cheaper online, folks, but support small business or you won't have small business. Even though at $64.99, it is a great buy per issue for all the content you're getting. $64.99 is an expensive book, even at the end of the year when you might be buying presents for people.
Will you have any copies of the Kickstarter hardcovers on your shelves purchased via the retailer tier of the Kickstarter?
Yes, both covers. The box with the 4 Joe covers in hardcover and the box with the 4 Cobra hardcovers. And some of those extras, the trading cards and the issue 21 with the other cover and the yearbook 1 reprint with the other cover or something.
Yeah. People are beginning to have it land on their doorstep this week.
I have gotten my email confirmation that it is shipped.
Excellent. So I think that is us done. Next time on Talking Joe, we will be covering the latest issues of G.I. Joe from SKYBOUND as they come out. Issue 313 will be released 22nd of January. In the distant future, 2025. Imagine that. It will be delivered via flying car, I'm sure. We'll also be looking at G.I. Joe in the Energon universe as it comes out, revisiting the Devil's Due era, and much, much more. So, I think that is us. Done, dusted, covered in tinsel. But remember,
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.